Hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Peep into Education. And I'm Kylie Elizabeth, also known as the Virtuoso Educator. And on today's episode, I have my special guest with me this evening, Dr. Carmen McPherson Stanbury, who is coming to us from Connecticut by way of England, which is really exciting. And so Mrs. Stanbury, or Dr. Stanbury, excuse me, is going to talk to us a little bit today on family and student engagement. Dr. Stanbury has been an educator for over 33 years with all of the ins and outs and roles in education, and I'll let her kind of give a little bit of explanation of what she has done. And so thank you again, Dr. Stanbury, for joining us, and I would love for you to just give an intro about yourself and, you know, what led you to the world of education, and we'll kind of tackle our topics for today.
Hey, so what led me to the world of education? Actually, interestingly, Kylie, you shared your musical background. I played the piano from the age of 7 to 17, and I had to, what should I say, matriculate through these exams on an annual basis. But what my music teacher would do, she would have me, at least with the theory, she would have me check the theory papers of the younger students. And I quite enjoyed that. I was doing that at about the age of 14. And then sort of when I got to about 18, 19, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I thought I kind of flirted with the idea of becoming a nurse. And my mom says, nah, Carmen, that is not for you. She was a nurse herself and she knew how squeamish I was. So she was like, that's not for you. And so I kind of, around 19, I was back in England. And because I was born in England, I went to Jamaica at the age of 11, went to high school there and went back to England at the end of high school. Nice. And so there were these courses that were being offered for ethnic minority teachers, right? And I was too young at the time. You had to be 21 and over. I kind of made a pest of myself at the local college that was offering the course. And so at the age of 20, the director said to me, all right, next year you've gotten in. You don't have to take the exam again. You don't have to write the paper again. You're good. And that was back in 84. So that was a really long time ago. I'm telling my age, right? So that's 40 years ago, right? So, and so that was it. And that's what got me into education. I wanted to impact my community. I wanted to teach children who looked like me. I wanted to be a role model. And that was, I remember that being my my platform at my first interview back in 1991 in the South London borough of Lambeth. I taught in Brixton, which was another inner city high needs local, and moved to the States, and by way of another way, and here I am, however many years later. I'm a woman of faith. I've been an educator, as I said, for 30 odd years. I see myself as an educational leader. I'm also a mother, a grandmother, and I'm also a wife, obviously, right? And that's it, really. My what should I say? My passion in education has to do with structural inequities, being a voice and an advocate for those who are not heard as they should be. I see myself, and I've always positioned myself kind of intentionally and not intentionally. It just kind of happened as being that advocate for parents, right? So whether it's in the PPT meeting, ensuring that parents understand what's being said, ensuring that teachers are explaining and letting parents understand the acronyms. What does this mean? Because what I've seen oftentimes is that teachers will and parents won't say anything, right? Unless they themselves are already empowered. So I see myself as that advocate and that voice. And for our kids as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry. Just taking notes. I always say this. I know in all my podcasts, when I'm looking down, I'm taking notes. So thank you so much for sharing all that. And I love, we just got to touch base. So that's awesome. That with the music education, the theory, man, just kind of brings me back to my college days. I did a funny story when I went to school for music. I didn't do any music theory until I got to college. And so that and keyboarding was quite difficult for me with piano piano skills. And I really
Right.
wish I learned piano at 7, and maybe I would have saved myself a year
Right.
of my college program. But hey, here we are. So
Mm,
thank you so much for sharing your backstory and then kind of how you got into there. And I think, we hear a lot too about how our parents kind of swayed us in one way or direction for,
mm,
what we do in our career and things like that. And,
mhm.
I like too that your mom, even though it was something I had talked about with somebody else, how it's you usually do what your parents are doing or you're completely
Right.
different. And so it's
Right, right,
interesting how
right.
your mom was like, no, you probably might not want to do this role, but well, here you are. And so you've been advocating, and as you're saying,
Mm,
you're a passionate educator and you've been working in this field for so long. And
mhm,
what I
mhm.
love with speaking with educators such as yourself, who's been in this world for decades, is I always like and curious from your perspective, some things that may have been the same over the years, or things that have drastically changed, either in a good or a bad way around education. And since we're kind of focusing on that advocacy for even for parents,
Mhm.
like understanding, what are some things that you've noticed over the years in education as it relates to families or parent engagements in schools?
So one of the things that seems to have happened is that parents, I hate to say this, parents are getting younger, but
Hmm.
not only that, I think, especially, I can only speak of the urban context because that's where I've lived. Yeah. And what I've seen is that the parents that are coming into our schools now, they themselves had matriculated through the same school system.
Hmm.
So if their experiences were not positive, then that distrust is still there,
Yeah.
but yet they want the best for their children. So I think that I've seen a slight shift in that.
Hmm.
I've also seen, however, where parents want to step up, where they want to be involved. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? But I think there's some structures within the schooling system, and not even within the system itself, but in our mindsets, right, and the beliefs, right, of educators in terms of the motives and the agendas of parents, and that hasn't changed.
Hmm.
And I think if that can change, then the involvement, parent involvement, will be seen in a different way,
Yeah.
and then we'll be more open to parents. So
Yeah.
that's what I've seen in
Yeah. That makes
over my time,
yeah.
because
I,
I want to say I was guilty at one point of thinking that parents don't care.
mhm. No, I think so. And
Yes,
I
yes,
think it's a
I
great,
was guilty. I said
yeah,
they didn't care.
yeah,
They weren't at the meeting, they didn't care. But
yeah.
wisdom and just some enlightenment was like, mm-mm-mm.
Hmm.
What is caring one community is not caring another, and that has nothing to do with parents, because all parents love their kids,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
99.999% of them want the best for
Yeah.
their kids, and even those who we think don't, they still do. They just
Hmm.
might not be able to articulate. They may not have the resources, right? For the most part, they don't have the social cultural capital to help them navigate our
Hmm.
systems and our structures. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, I agree. And I think that's parent involvement and engagement is one of the, I think one of the bigger, I don't want to say it, call it a challenge. I would just say it's more like of a hurdle, like how, or I don't know what object to compare it to, because there's so many
Yeah,
reasons of why they
facets.
do not engage or can't
Yeah.
engage, or what even is the issue. And and schools try to tackle it from multiple facets of, is it the way we're communicating? Is it are they getting the information? Is there a language barrier? Like there's so many, or
Mm.
like you said, they just don't
Mm-hmm,
want to.
mm-hmm.
And I think that right
Right.
now in our world of education, I've spoken this before, that a lot of people are very defensive, and everybody's kind of quick to assume that everybody feels some
Mm-hmm.
way about each other, instead of like actually just getting into
Mm-hmm.
a room and having a conversation. And I think
Conversation.
mhm,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
just actually
Mm-hmm.
talking through those things. And but I think a lot too goes to our parents, receiving transparent information from the schools of how they can be involved. For me, it's like my
Mm-hmm.
daughter's
Mm-hmm.
about to go into middle school, and she's 2 months away from starting her new school, and I've already the PTA I saw on their website, they have a PTA. I was like, oh, I found my way in. Let me see how I can, kind of be involved in.
Right.
And my daughter's like rolling her eyes already. She's like, I can't believe that you signed up. But it's like, I'm that type of parent where it's like, I want to
Right.
know what's happening and what's
Right.
being involved. And, as an educator,
Right.
I kind of have
Mm-hmm.
that importance as a higher
Mm-hmm.
level in my
Mm-hmm.
mind for me, but not every parent is that way, which is okay.
Right.
And so I just advocate all the time is like, do your best where you can and when you can, and at
Yes.
least, make some
Yes.
effort throughout the school year to do the most that you can for your child within school. And I do
Yeah.
think, like you owned up, like we all kind of sometimes can place the blame on the parents, especially when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
behavior, when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
respect given or not given towards adults and all of these things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just wondering, like, have you, like, kind of had some type of, um, what, like, within your leadership role, like, have you been able to kind of break that type of narrative? And what
Yes.
did that look like for you with your
Yes.
parents?
Yeah. Wow. So many stories. So,
Yes.
so there were two real aha moments for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? One, when a parent went off on me. I was still in the classroom. Parent went off on me, went downtown, made a whole complaint about me. It was a misunderstanding. But what it was something really, really simple. It was about parents entering through side doors during dismissal. It was dismissal one year. I was teaching fifth grade. The parent was going through the side door. I says, ma'am, you can't go that way. And she went off on me. And I think I probably said, well, who do you think you're talking to?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was a long time ago. So she made a complaint. That I think at that time it was the assistant superintendent came to the school, met with myself and the principal spoke highly of me, and so on and so forth. That's not it. What happened was the next school year, the principal of the school that I was at decided that she was going to kind of streamline the kids. They wanted to create a high, middle, and low group to kind of strategically, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean, ensure that the needs of all kids were being met. They gave me the high group. Whose child was on that list? This same woman.
Yeah.
And, the principal said to me, you don't have to take her if you don't want to. I was like, oh man, I thought
Mm-hmm.
about it. I says, but I can't deny the child the experience that she's going to get by, because of what happened. So of course I took the high road, right? And I accepted
Mm-hmm.
the child. Well, needless to say, we get to the first marking period report card conferences, and this woman is sitting across me. And so I'm going through her daughter's report cards because her daughter is excellent, blah, 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 blah. And then she breaks the ice. She says, I just want to apologize. I says, no, I want to apologize also. She says, my daughter has nothing but good things to say about you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I use that story with teachers to tell them, listen, it's not the end of the world when, a parent goes off on you. But anyway, what broke the ice for me? What kind of like changed my mindset? So I'm in the high school now, and in a high needs neighborhood, like one of the most challenging high schools in the town that I work in. And parents, issues would happen with children over the weekend, right? And parents would bring it to school on a Monday. And I had what I thought was this wonderful thing. I would say to them, we are an educational establishment. We are not a law enforcement agency. Did you go to the police?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I couldn't understand why they'd get upset, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would get upset. I couldn't understand why they're getting upset. And I would sometimes engage in a slight I would engage in a back and forth until one day my principal, she calls me, right? Because I guess they'd been complaining. And she's like, Carmen, you can't say that. I was like, what? I said, but it's true. She says, I know it's true, Carmen, but you can't say that, right? And I learned to listen,
Mm-hmm.
even if it doesn't make sense, just listen to them.
Yeah.
And once I cued into that, that was it. I realized it ain't about me personally. It ain't even about us. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Even if it is about you,
Yeah.
just listen. And so that was my change, because I was like, we are an educational institution. We are not a law enforcement agency. And I guess the accent didn't help because they said I was being condescending. I didn't think I
Yeah.
was being
Yeah.
condescending, but I was. In hindsight, I was. So
That.
yeah, so that was what changed it for me, and in my also in my in one of my doctoral classes that I was doing, I forget what it was, it had to do with social justice. um we did this whole thing on social cultural capital, which I had no knowledge of. And when I really thought about it, yeah, our parents are coming. So school is designed, right, with middle class values, expectations, and
Mhm.
that's not where a lot of our parents are. They have values and
You're right.
expectations, but there's not that through line from home to school for them. So
Right.
they have to navigate an environment that is totally alien. And like you said, they don't necessarily have the resources. And we come making, assumptions about them, and
Mhm.
you know what I mean, which have
Yeah.
not, about them, and we know little or nothing about them. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up too, and somebody else has shared this with me, being matriculated through that same school system that, the parent went through,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't successful for them, yet they send their kids back to the same
Right.
system, right? Especially if they can't
Yes.
get out of certain neighborhoods that they're in, and things like that. And when
Mm-hmm.
the person had mentioned this to me, this was a couple months back, I didn't really think of that, but it's like that is a kind of systematic thing that happens over and over again. And
Yes. Yeah.
the good
Mm-hmm.
thing now, what's more, a little bit more positive, is that we do have a little bit of freedom of choice of where to send our kids, as school choice is
Right.
becoming a more relevant
Mm-hmm.
thing in most states.
Prevalent.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
still not as accessible to all students, especially like for me, I drive my kids 30 minutes to their school where I choose for
Right.
them to go to, instead of walking them across the street to
Mm.
the one that's right
Mm.
here.
Mm.
But
Mm.
if I didn't have the means to do so, then we're kind of stuck in a place where
Right.
we don't want our kids to go to.
Exactly.
And so, like you
Yeah.
said, to kind of understand, I definitely
Mm-hmm.
advocate for teachers, especially new teachers and administrators, to learn the community in which they live, and kind of understanding the
Mm-hmm.
demographics and the hardships that might be faced,
Mm-hmm.
and really kind
Mm-hmm.
of talking to those parents, and involving them in a way to help understand those needs. And of course, we
Yeah.
can't, in the education system, we can't fix all of everybody's hardships, or
All the problems.
all the
Right. But
problems,
still,
but
yes.
but but offer something to help suffice those things. So with that being said, I was kind of taking a peek at your LinkedIn account, and I love the resources and what you share in here. And I think this word, I don't know, I want to mess up on it, but it's allodoxophobia, the fear of people's opinions. And you posted that,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you think about me is none of my business. And I think too, as teachers and educators, that can be kind of hard to, because we want our students to like us, we want parents to like us, but at the same time, we're
Mm-hmm.
here for a specific job and a specific role. And
Right.
those opinions, it's helpful, but it's not something
At
that's, I think, at
times
the
it can
top.
get in the
Yeah,
way.
it could get in the way.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how did you
Yeah.
navigate, um, uh, the stigmas of being an educator, and kind of, those opinions that people might assume about us as educators as we're trying to educate their children?
So I think for me, it's kind of knowing that I'm coming from a space of authenticity,
Hmm.
and realizing that over time I wouldn't necessarily have been able to articulate this 30 years ago, even 30,
Hmm.
20 years ago or so, but over time, you know what I mean, and knowing that I wanted the best and continue to want the best for my students,
Hmm.
right? um and kind of being able to express that and share that with
Yeah.
even with teachers. So I have a friend who's a teacher, and I said to her, I said, what would you say is one of my strengths? She says, you care a lot about the parents and their families. I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, I should though. She says yes, but sometimes, because she's still of that mind, I can't get her to shift. She's of that
Hmm.
mindset that the parents are, and I'm like, no, you can't think like that, you
Hmm.
know. But I think, for me, I come from like, I don't know how to be fake.
Hmm.
Let me put it that
Yeah.
way in layman's terms,
Yeah.
right? I've never known how to be that, right? I've
Yeah.
gotten better. I don't necessarily wear everything on my face anymore, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I do care, And I think with that caring, right, it has only intensified as I've gotten older, and the longer I've been in the business of education, right? Because you learn after a while how to handle things. Like
Mhm.
one of the things that I can say, it doesn't always work, but I can get the parent off the ledge,
Mhm.
right? Once upon a time, I'd help them go onto the ledge. But now I've learned how to get them off the ledge, you know?
Yeah.
And I go back to saying that listening part has been absolutely key. And not just not just being quiet while they talk, but listening to understand,
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
know. And I think, again, because of the environment, because of the fact that when by the time parents are like calling the school or coming to the school, um several things have happened that you're not even aware of, right? Obviously conversations with teachers and so on and so forth, and they're highly upset. So by that time I need to unpack what's going on. I'll give you
Mhm.
a quick example. About 2 3 weeks ago, a parent came in the morning, and she was like, she went to see the teacher. And I says, well, why? She says, well, she accused my son of this, and another kid had, called her names, and, so on and so forth. So her son and this other kid, they've been at it for a while. But I
Mhm.
wasn't aware of that, right? Because the teacher hadn't told me. But I absolutely knew that you can't go see this lady first thing in the morning, right? Meaning the parent can't go and see the teacher first thing in the morning. She's
Yeah.
like, no, she's insisting. I says, well, she's teaching right now, right? So kind of let me know what happened. So I said, all right, come into my office and let's talk.
Mhm.
So she begins to tell the story. I says, all right, why don't we do this? Why don't I get your son here? Let me get your son and see what's going on. So she's still upset. She's really upset. I spoke to the son. He told me what happened. I said, all right, go back to class. So I said to her, I will talk to the other child, find out, and then I would get back to her by the end of the day. So
Mhm.
mom leaves. She's still upset. And I'm doing all this fact finding, these two first grade boys, and find out what happened, get the story straight. Now it's about after 5. I'm ready to leave, and I'm like, oh no, I can't leave. I told her I was gonna call her back. I gotta call
Mhm.
her back. So I didn't have an answer because I couldn't prove that what her son was saying was right. Or what,
Yeah.
I said to her, I said I wasn't able to really find out exactly what happened. Do you know what? The woman that was there in the morning to the woman that was two completely different people. She says, listen, I thank you for calling me back. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's okay. I understand. And I left feeling, wow, because whatever it was, obviously, God knows what had gone on at home before. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But the fact that I couldn't prove that what her son had told her was true. And so I
Yeah.
was a bit worried about that. I was like, oh my gosh, she's probably still going to be upset. And now what am I going to have to do to more fact finding, right?
Right.
First grade. But yeah, so things like that kind of make it worthwhile, because sometimes you never know how it's going to go, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how young the child is, it's still their child. Do you
Right.
know what I mean? And you become the lawyer, the attorney, the social, you're trying to navigate all
Yeah.
these. You got the two little kids. All right, what did you say? Did anybody hear? Yes. So you call the friend now, and
Mhm.
now you got to call back the other parents as
Yeah.
well. Listen, I had to talk to your son. They're kind of like, okay, no problem, but I got the upset parents. So you're
Yeah.
juggling all these balls at times, and
Yeah.
but
And I think
yeah.
the
So
follow up too to that, like you said, you never know what a parent or a person's going through, and for whatever set them off, or they still might have wanted
yes,
answers. But I think the
yeah,
simple fact too that you followed up. I think a lot of times us as teachers, we don't do
yes,
that follow up piece or follow through on
yes,
something we say that we're going to do. Um, and even me as a parent, with my littles that are in elementary, I'm very like, wait, who said what and they did what, and so I'm like immediately like, I'm not calling like blowing up their phone, but I'm just like, hey, just
no, I know.
this kind of was said and things. And my son, he has a speech delay and impediment, so
Yeah,
sometimes he kind of feels some type of way. I just want to make sure he's not being teased or those types of things. But
yeah,
I think even as a parent, just like for that follow up to say, hey, I actually tried to have some
yes,
type of resolution or figure it out is
yes,
can go a long way
yeah,
too for parents.
yeah.
um
One of the things that I've done, especially with like new teachers, like this year, because I had two brand new teachers, and they I try to coach them through the especially if they I remember one teacher had the potential to be a kind of challenging meeting with a parent. So I said to him I'd sit in. He was like, "No, you don't have to sit in." I said, "I will sit in." It was going to be a phone call. I said, "I will sit in just to kind of, navigate if needed." You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And just to kind of give them the language to say, even if I had to write a note and say, "Don't say that." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just to kind of coach them through, because oftentimes, um, especially new, I think older, more veteran teachers are a little bit more adept at that, and then again it depends, but find
Yeah.
something good to tell the parent about
Yeah.
their child, please, before
Yes.
you go into everything the child is doing wrong,
Yeah.
because then they feel kind of defeated,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And I think too, I was kind of laughing, like, I think as veteran teachers, like, especially if we're responding to something via email or, all of the parent communication apps, and, you'll start texting something and
yeah,
it kind of like you're reading it like, oh, like I'm being defensive or I might cause an argument by what I say. So you kind of tweak and
yeah,
rephrase what you say or how you say it
yeah,
so it doesn't come off a certain way.
yes,
And
yeah,
I think newer educators don't really understand how to kind of navigate those types of conversations. And so for somebody to sit in
yeah,
and to say, hey, no, probably don't say it
yeah,
that way. You might want to say it more like this.
yeah,
It makes sense. And I kind of do the
yeah,
same thing when I'm talking to my kids' teachers. I'm like, okay, I was a teacher at one point
right,
and I don't want to come off. So I think there's a lot of things to be said about even just that
yeah,
communication style
mm-hmm,
between parents and educators of like, okay, I'm not being
yes,
condescending, because I've had teachers talk to me in a very condescending way, and like they don't, and like
yeah,
you said, like at the beginning of our
mm-hmm,
conversation, parents not understanding, some parents not understanding like
mm-hmm.
lingo or like acronyms or things like that.
Mhm,
But I
mhm.
was spoken to in the sense of, she didn't know I was an educator and that I didn't know anything about
Right.
education. And I had to
Mm,
kind of
mhm,
correct that. Like, no, I actually, you can talk to me in
mhm.
all the educational terms. I know them all. Like, so it's, I think that,
Yes.
that going in with, the assumptions of people not understanding, instead of just being direct and
Mm.
having, and speaking the language as it is between each other. And if there's
Yes.
a clarification
Yes.
needed, that's, when those questions can come about. But I think, again, that dynamic between families, especially if you come from an experience where you just didn't have a good time in school,
Yeah.
or your parents didn't have a good time in school, or if
Right,
you were a
right.
troublesome student, that
Mhm,
becomes very hard to kind of get
mhm.
away from that. And even as an adult
Right.
with children, even me, I'm just like,
Mhm.
okay, I kind of like, I don't want to coach my kids to be looking for things that could be,
Right.
coming off racist by a teacher, could be, bias or
Yeah.
things. But I also want my kids to understand like
To
certain
be
things
aware.
should not be
Mhm.
said.
Shouldn't.
And so it's like, how do you
Yes.
navigate those?
Mhm.
So I guess within your leadership with teachers, and working with families, what are some strategies or tools that you've used with them to kind of help them guide those types of conversations, or practice those types of communication skills?
So, one of the things, right? I know that we can't legislate or force parental involvement, right?
Hmm.
But I think one of the things that we need to do is to trust them, all right?
Yeah.
And that's hard to kind of communicate that to teachers, but definitely trust them and be real in our interactions, all right? The other thing that I'll say, don't take their upsets personally.
Yeah.
I also say respect them and believe that the majority of parents want the absolute best for their children, like I said earlier, and
Hmm.
give them some tips, tools, and strategies to help their children at home, and just communicate regularly.
Yeah.
Don't let things build up, and that happens a lot of times, and it's just a reminder to the parents, I'm sorry, to the teachers,
Hmm.
and believe in the good of the parents. Trust our families, right?
Yeah.
Believe in their intent, I say, for good, and believe that they do absolutely care. Don't condescend. Acknowledge and honor them, honor their child and their efforts to raise their child, because it's not easy.
Right.
Because remember that when they're upset, we must understand the upset. Don't
Mhm.
take it personally. Bad news about their child is upsetting.
Right.
And an angry parent, I don't know where I read this, but an angry parent is an involved parent.
Yes. No, for sure.
Don't take it personally. It's not necessarily about you. And then in some cases it is, but it's a learning, it's a teachable moment for you.
Hmm.
It definitely is a teachable moment for you.
Yeah,
Um, Understand that in different cultures, parent involvement looks different. So
absolutely.
I'm from a Jamaican community. My mom was never up to school. My mom couldn't go to school. That like the parent teacher, she couldn't do it. She was
Hmm.
working. You know what I mean? She was a single parent. And this is when I was little in England, even and then going to school in Jamaica. My mother wasn't at the school. In fact, in our culture, if if you have to come to the school, what is wrong? What did you do?
Right.
Right? That's the only time for the most part. That whole thing about having, PTA and all of that. It's a very, I'm not saying you understand what I'm saying. It's a very white middle class
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
expectation,
Hmm.
right? And being in the school and do you know what I mean, helping out. We gotta go work, we gotta go take care of our
Hmm.
children, we gotta take care of our families. We don't
Yeah.
have that liberty. Many don't have that liberty. Some do,
Right.
some don't. You know
Right.
what I mean? So parent involvement looks different. An involved parent is a parent. I got my child up, they're dressed, they're fed,
Hmm.
they have on the uniform if there's one, they're properly
Yeah.
clothed, they've got the supplies that they need. Boom, now
Yeah.
they're yours. What's
Yeah.
wrong with that?
Right.
I'm
Right.
involved,
Right.
you know? Um,
Yeah.
so I tell them also to develop authentic relationships with your parents, right?
Yes.
Take an interest in them and their children and share ideas with them. At
Hmm.
my school, one of the things I noticed, but then I've become kind of guilty. I don't even go outside in the mornings. But one of the things that I noticed was that my teachers, so we would have like parent teachers report card conference coming up or even a family night. And my teachers, they're lining up with their kids. The parents are all out there, but no one's moving from the wall to go meet, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
To just go
Yeah.
interact with the parents. And I
Yeah.
noticed that. I've been guilty of not coming out in the mornings, but that's usually because I'm like out in
Sure.
fires and so forth in the building. But just going and just touching, you know what I mean? Just
Right.
touching them, just showing them that you're there. And that
Yeah.
speaks for me as well sometimes.
No, and I think that little piece
So
does
those
go
are
a
some
long
of
way.
my
Yeah.
tips.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I also see, yeah, that does go a long way, too. Even just the simple hi and like, wave to them. And even at my kids drop off, it's a smaller school. They only have about 500
Yes.
kids, but even at drop off or pickup and they see
Yeah.
your cards, they're like, oh, it's the so-and-so's, like they know me as the
Yeah.
parent because, it's consistent, but even like
Yes.
saying hi and like, even that just, I think
Yep.
that, that type of
That does
recognition as
something.
they know who you are and
Yes.
you're not just somebody random. I also see too,
Right.
on your LinkedIn, that your school offers a parent advisory council. um,
Yes.
so how is that going, because I think too that's something that's important, as well, especially at an elementary school level.
So all of our schools in our district have a parent advisory council. It's named something else in the high schools,
Hmm.
and basically every school receives funds for the parents to put on through Title 1 monies
Okay.
for parents to put on events and so forth for the families. My current parent my PAC president. She had some health issues this year, so kind of like, but we still
Hmm.
work together via the phone, and we've been able to have a couple of events this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
that, but the funds that they get, they spend that how they choose. All
Hmm.
right, they'll get my advice, but they spend it how they choose. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's beautiful. And I love things like that, and it doesn't have to be something that's like, oh, I am requiring your presence every week at the school, but just
right.
having
No,
something
no, 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 no.
available that's
Yeah,
even
like we just had
outside
an
of your
author in.
conferences.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
We
that's
had
one
an
that I
author
love.
come in. Yeah, who was a
Yeah.
Bridgeport a native, but she wrote these books, and I said, why not have Tangela come in and
Hmm.
so we had, and we bought the books actually 2 years ago. We just couldn't get her in, and we
Hmm.
finally were able to have the story time evening,
Yeah.
which turned out to be really nice. Kids came in
Yeah.
their pajamas, the parents came, and their blankets, and yeah. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so another question that I like to ask all of the guests is, kind of considering all of the things you know about education, like what is one of the biggest areas that we need to focus on in our educational world to really kind of better the system for our students and our teachers and our parents? Like, what are some things that you think really need to be tackled?
one of the things that I think, right, has to do, and I'm going to keep saying in the urban context, yeah,
Mhm.
I think that a lot of focus recently, especially since George Floyd, has been on equity, right? Diversity,
Mhm.
equity, and inclusion. How we know, but however, we know that these are not new topics, right?
Right, right.
But I think really getting some self examination. What are my beliefs about, for educators, what are
Yeah.
my beliefs about children and how children learn and who can learn?
Mhm.
What are my beliefs? Because I think we kind of stay at the surface, right? So we see, in terms of the iceberg, we'll see the underachievement, we'll see the chronic absenteeism, we see all the things that are going wrong,
Right.
right? But we don't go to the bottom of the iceberg where we have those belief systems,
Yeah.
right? Our mental models. What are we really thinking about our children and our families? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can we shift? Are we entering it into a fixed mindset, or are we utilizing a growth mindset? I think, and I think this needs to happen in the teacher prep programs,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if now with the shift, because of, what is it, a teacher shortage, now they're
Hmm.
changing the way in which we prepare teachers, right?
Hmm.
So we're kind of opening up the doors more,
Hmm.
finding alternate routes to certification, at least in my state they are.
Yeah.
Maybe we can kind of invite people who really, really want to teach and are really about the business of education. And it's not
Right.
just it's not that default thing. And
Right.
no
And
disrespect to anyone out there. I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
no, I
I don't
100%
know if that makes
agree.
sense.
No, it does.
Hmm.
And because I've seen it too, where people are just kind of so miserable in their job, like they don't, or even at the high school, I cover a lot of career and technical ed programs where people are coming from the industry themselves and not in they
Right.
didn't go into the industry thinking that they were going to work with children or work with students, or
Right.
adolescents, right? And so they don't have that the more empathetic emotional side to the position.
Yes.
It's not just
Yeah.
something that's analytical and that you're just kind of running lessons. Like you have to like really think of the whole child. So I too think that understanding our own biases, working
Yeah.
understanding even things from our own selves of what kind of leads us in how we see people, because I'm even too as like
Yes.
a I preferred working with high school students because I knew I don't like, and it's so bad to say, I didn't care to work with little
The little
kids like
ones.
elementaries because I didn't like the whining all day and the crying, and like
Mm.
I like those
Mm.
mature conversations and being able to
Mm.
kind of be more myself than having to be that parental role.
Mm.
It's more of like, I guess, a cousin role or a big sister role. Like, it's kind of like, how do you see
Mm.
that position versus it just being like, oh, I'm here to teach. But no, you still got to teach, like, and think of all the
They're
things
still
that
people.
comes in because
Yes.
they are
Yeah.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember where the post is, and I'm probably not quoting it 100% right, but someone said, to believe that a child is not capable of something, you're like really hurting that child. And so I like how you talked about like, what do we think about children and how they can learn and what they do know. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it is important, I kind of compare, like you said, we're all from different cultures, but even when you really kind of study and look at different like countries and what they're doing and what
Right.
these kids are capable
Yes.
of doing, I'm just sitting back
Yep.
like, and I'm even as a parent watching my own kids like, okay, they're like, they're sucked into the US way
Mm-hmm.
of being children and
Mm-hmm.
not, more
Mm-hmm.
lazy. They don't want to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
kids in all these other countries that excel and can do things like
Mm-hmm.
algebra
Mm-hmm.
math at 3 years old. Like it's not insane. I think
Right.
people just have to realize that we're all highly capable at any age to do a
Right.
lot of things. And it's really like, let's give them the resources instead of kind of holding them back, or, even
Right.
faulting them for emotions that they can't control as an elementary school kid and things like
Yeah,
that.
no, but one of the things that I've seen, and I totally agree with you, I think one of the things that I've seen also being in the elementary setting is that um if how might I want to see education change? I think less of the programming, right? As because there's a program, right? There's a
Yeah.
programming, there's an expectation. Once you enter
Yes.
school, these little I see little 4 or 5 year olds coming into school, and now
Hmm.
listen, you get this is how you do it. This and when they don't do it, I've seen it for
Yeah.
3 years in a row now. When they don't do it now, oops,
Yeah.
there's something wrong with them. Maybe not. I've got
Hmm.
grandkids, right? My grandson, the youngest grandchild is 4, but my
Hmm.
grandkids are homeschooled,
Hmm.
right? Because my son, but he did well
Yeah.
with the first one. So I said, you know what, I leave y'all alone. Y'all know what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? And my grandson, the 4 year old, if we were to put him in school now, oh Lord, they'd probably say that we need to go get him tested, right?
Hmm.
Because he wouldn't conform.
Right.
But yet the kid is sharp and smart. So
Hmm.
for instance, I went there the other day and I don't know what he was playing a game. And he says to me, I like to play that game, but mommy doesn't like the game, and daddy doesn't like the game, and Shiloh, his brother, doesn't like the game, but I like the game.
Yeah.
And he said, in fact, I want to go outside, right? And just leave everyone, take my computer, take the laptop outside and
Hmm.
play the game where nobody will bother him. Now, to me, that's some high level reasoning.
Yeah.
His sister, right, the middle child, she's, she has some developmental challenges.
Hmm.
And so she was crying the other day, got in the car and, I said, oh, Kaya, what's wrong? Da, da, da. And Omni's like, maybe she wants to be outside. Maybe. And I'm like, all right, so where's this vocabulary coming from, right?
Hmm.
I'm just saying that, um, yet these kids are learning, right? My
Yeah.
grandson, just finished a performance yesterday. He does taekwondo.
Hmm.
My son has him like go through some of the state
Yeah.
assessments just to
Okay.
see where he is,
The
but
benchmark
they
too.
have not learned in the traditional sense in the
Hmm.
schoolroom. But they're far. You sit and engage with these kids, and not because they're my grandkids. I'm just saying you sit and
Yeah.
engage, and a lot of kids like that. It's a whole different,
Yes.
perspective. And then
Hmm.
I look, and one last story. We had a little boy come. We had 3 kids come in kindergarten this year, and woo, Jesus Lord. Um, but when I tell you, smart one is highly articulate.
Hmm.
Another one, they came in at 4. They turned 5 before December. And one reads on a third grade level, but all over the place. They were
Yeah.
kicking, they were screaming, all over the
Yeah.
place. Right? And they came with their IEPs and stuff.
Hmm.
And initially, I know the mindset was not for me, but the mindset was, oh, they can't, this ain't where they're supposed to be.
Hmm.
So where they gonna go? Because one,
Right.
the district don't have nowhere for them to go, right?
Right.
But how about us meeting them where they are,
Right.
tuning into those strengths, right?
Right.
But I know it's not easy because you need the additional support, you need the paraprofessionals. So if those resources could be put into play, and we do, yeah, let's do this thing a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not in rows, not okay, if we're gonna learn the alphabet, we gotta start at, I guess it's M,
Hmm.
and then we go back to A. Like, come on
Yeah.
now. And
Yeah.
then the other thing I think, I was like, so why are we not doing A? Because I was new to this. They're like, no, you
Yeah.
go to. I was like, all right, I
Yeah.
guess I don't know.
It's interesting. No,
The
for sure.
initiatives need to stop.
Yes, the initiatives, and I think too, and probably people are like, "Oh, here we go," but it's like we're so focused, hyper focused on that assessment side of it, of how are these kids performing, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just not letting them
Mm-hmm.
be kids at an earlier side, and just really focusing on, like, for me, that K through 3 is all about phonetics and learning literacy skills, like. But
Yes.
you don't
Yeah.
have to be so rigorous on them to the point where now my kids
Right.
testing, they're over it. Like they do so many benchmark tests and things like that. It's insane, like how much testing they
Yeah.
do. So then it's like, okay, are
Yeah.
you actually wanting wanting them to enjoy, these skills, or are you just wanting them to master them so it looks good on your side as a
Right.
school that you're performing, and that has no
Right.
benefit? And that kind of compares to, I think, it was an Asian country where they're like, they don't do any assessments until these kids are in middle school,
Because it's not
because
necessary.
it's not
Exactly.
necessary.
Yeah.
um,
It's
because
not
yeah.
necessary. And who does this level of testing? It's only
Yeah.
in certain communities and on certain
Hmm.
children. This
Hmm.
is not happening everywhere.
Yeah. It's
In
yeah.
the
It's
Montessori school, it's not happening.
yeah. Yep.
It's not
And then
happening. It's only
you
happening. Yeah.
and you would think if it's something that is like actually beneficial, and it makes sense, and it's proven, like, we want fact-based, proven methods, like
Yeah.
what is testing doing? I think
Yeah.
just burning out people a lot quicker than anything, in our
Yes.
students. So
Yeah.
I definitely, don't agree, with that sense. But I think even to the sense of homeschooling too, like when I was running the small charter, we had a family of 3 children that came. They were homeschooled, but I think they were in I think second, third, and fourth grade, and they all were homeschooled
Right.
prior to. But it was just really interesting on a they were very gifted academically, but more on that social skills is where you kind of saw a little bit
That's a
of
bit
lack.
lacking.
But
Yes.
I think too,
Yes.
parents
Yeah.
are highly capable of of teaching at home, and things like that. And you're going to leverage, just as teachers do, you're going to leverage the skills that you know most, and teach those to your children, or utilize the resources as you can. But I think, like you said, like just not knocking that down, but we also, as you said, need to meet these kids where they are. But when we have,
Mm.
30 kids in a classroom in some of our areas, that's not always as doable.
Some. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
it's always interesting. And that's where I'm kind of just like, at this point, even with my own kids, is it like it is what it is. And then I was on another call where we're like, okay, it is what it is in the public system, but then we still, as parents, kind of backtracking to what we were talking about, need to fill in those gaps that are missing as much as we
Yes.
can.
Absolutely.
Because I've learned recently, and I was shocked, and I'm like, how did I not know this? My third grader doesn't know how to count money. And I'm
Oh.
like,
Oh, okay.
I didn't know this. And now I'm like,
Okay.
man, I'm mad at myself. But I'm like, what is happening? What are we focused on? And I thought that is the whole
Mm.
like second and third grade level
Right.
content. And my son didn't understand that he didn't need a full dollar bill for a dollar. I was trying to give
Right.
quarters for something. He's like, no, I need $1. I'm like, no, you don't. Wait, you don't know money. I'm like, oh, you don't know money. Okay. So it's just really interesting
Right.
too.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And do you always see like a big difference, I guess, like in the generational differences between parents, or like the teachers, if you have like older teachers or even newer teachers? Like, have you noticed that in your leadership role of like people either demonstrating like, hey, kids can actually do better, or what does that look like with the age differences between educators?
So I think with the more veteran teachers, they're kind of a bit harder to kind of like get them to see something in a different way. They'll
Hmm.
call on you when they got to meet with a parent. Now, I'm like, suddenly your confidence is not here. Now you need me. Okay, fine, no
Hmm.
problem. Um, they are harder to shift, especially if they've been around for a long time. And I'm talking
Yeah.
20 plus years, 15
Yeah.
plus, 20 plus years.
Hmm.
um they've had some entrenched belief systems, right? And you're not gonna, I realize you're fighting a losing battle
Yeah.
with the younger teachers. Th- so those who want to grow, right? Because there are people who want that feedback, they want to know how they're doing,
Hmm.
right? And it has, irrespective of whether or not they've gotten tenure, yes or no, they want to improve. They'll take your strategies, they'll put them to the test. You know what I mean? It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be everything, but they will. Yeah, so that's kind of one of the things that I've seen as
Yeah.
it relates, and that crosses all pieces, with the parents and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And so my last question for you is I also saw through your LinkedIn, you talked about leading, and you mentioned this earlier, leading with authenticity and grace.
And grace.
So what does that
Yes.
mean to you in the
What does it
context of
mean?
education? And, how do you feel others should
So
kind of take
what
that
that
on?
mean so what that means, right, is kind of like checking my own bias. I had to check
Mhm,
my own bias at the door.
mhm,
I had to kind of like leave my assumptions at the door as well, right?
mhm,
Over the years. And it really stems from when I was in the high school, one of the high schools I was at, I had a teacher that would be late every day. You'd go to the class, the kids are sitting there. They're like, oh, she's going to be here soon. She's going to be here. You know, there's kids that cover for their teachers. She's going to be
yeah.
here. But her colleagues would say, oh my God, she's late again. And I'd say, well, she's your colleague. Why don't you have a conversation with her? But I knew I
Mhm,
had to call her in and talk to her. So I called her in and spoke with her. And she shared with me that she was having some childcare issues. This was like around the October, November part of the school year, the beginning of the school year.
mhm,
And she said she had no other way, but the nursery, the daycare where she took her 2-year old didn't open until 7:30, and by the time she left the town to get to us, it was well after 8 when school started at, I think, 7:40 or
mhm,
7:45. All right, so I did my mandatory thing. I wrote her up, you need to make sure you do this and failure and further, all of this, right? And then now, so that was that. I did that, gave her the letter, thought nothing else of it. Now, the end of that school year, the following July now, I'd requested a move from that particular school for different reasons, and it was honored. So I'm packing up to go to my new school, and I come across the email, the letter that I wrote her. And I read it and I thought, ooh, Carmen, that was harsh. Oh, no, no, no. Before that, at the end of year meeting with her, that summative meeting, and at the end of it, she says to me, oh, I've gotten my child into a different daycare, so I'm going to be able to get here a lot earlier. And I was like, oh, okay, that's good. That's great. All right, off for the summer. They're off for the summer, and I'm still at the school. So we get to the July now, and I see the letter and I read it. And I'm like, oh my God, Carmen, that was really, really harsh. Void of feeling, void of empathy. It was just that standard letter.
yeah.
If I had to write that, I would have gotten an A+.
Mhm,
But it was void because now I've got something else. She's told me that, listen, I've done this, right? And I'm not going to have that problem again. And I read that and I says, never again am I
mhm,
ever. Because I wrote those, I was good at those types of letters.
mhm,
And I won't say, but when your role models kind of sometimes look like you, and sometimes, I'm just going to say it, sometimes as women of color, right?
mhm,
Like in our leadership roles, at least in my generation, right?
mhm.
Kind of like, all
It is what
right,
it is.
that's
Yeah.
just kind of how we are, right?
Yeah.
We tackling the right.
Yeah.
And those were some of my role models, right? My good friends were some of my role models, and I kind of adapted some of that, right? Because
Mhm.
you're to the book,
Yeah.
but the book ain't always nice. It's not
Right.
always empathetic. It's not sensitive.
Yeah.
And I said I'd never do that again. And 6, 7 years in, I stopped. And so much so that I had someone say to me the other day, and this is someone who, for whatever reason, I've always had to do a little slap on the wrist because they either haven't gotten their grades put in on time, they're always missing the deadlines, and
Mhm.
but they had a personal situation, a family member had passed, and so on and so forth earlier on in the year. And the other day we were all in a workshop and we had to give each other compliments and so forth. And this particular teacher said to me, um, one of the things that he wanted to say to me was that I'm thoughtful. And I thought to myself, oh, geez, as many times I've had to slap him on the wrist,
Mhm.
but I guess I've done it in such do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's not what you say, it's how you
How you
say
say
it.
it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm never, I think that I'm fear.
Mhm.
Sometimes I have to, but I'm not that kind of like, "Shh, I'm going for your jugular." I don't do that mess anymore. What
Yeah.
am I fighting for?
Right.
What? You know what I mean? What am I
Right.
proving for what?
Mhm.
But I've been
Yeah.
there, you know what I mean? So that's why, that's what that
Yes.
is.
I've been on both
Leaving
sides.
people, leaving people with their dignity
Right.
intact.
Absolutely.
Leaving them with their dignity intact,
And I think too,
because,
it's tough. It's so tough in
and I've
our
been a
and
recipient
yeah,
myself of the
I have to.
harshness and the,
Yeah, yes,
yeah.
I definitely have too. I won't go into my story too much, but yeah, I
No,
definitely have been on
you
the
can't.
both ends, and I think even on the other end
Yes.
too, of like where one was a really good friend of mine working for me at my school, and I just did not like certain things, and I'm like, oh, like how do I say this? Kind of breaking those barriers. But I think that's a topic for another
Yes.
time. So,
For
um,
another time.
yes, I think
Yes.
we'll have to revisit some of these ones too for sure. Well, and we're already almost an hour in, so thank you so much, Dr. Stanbury, for
Thank
all of your
you.
feedback and all of the things that you've done in our world of education. Is there any last thing or last word of wisdom you'd like to leave our followers for today? And otherwise, I'll lead them to your contact info.
I think children don't care how much you know. I didn't coin this until they know how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a principal many, many years ago who said, be firm but fair,
Mm-hmm.
and that fair can look like many different things, but be fair and love them. They
Yes,
know when you love them. They
absolutely.
know.
They
So
they
that's
definitely
it.
do. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody. Well, make sure you
Thank you.
go and check out Dr. Carmen McPherson Stanbury. She is on LinkedIn. You can connect with her there, and then I'll be sure to tag her page on our comments and below. And please feel free to like, comment, and share this session today. And myself, Kylie Elizabeth, and Dr. Carmen. And you guys all have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.